Raiders fans, we are disappointed. It feels like the playoffs are far away. We're going to talk about this game against the Rams, some of the BS calls that happened in this game, and some of the weird calls and BS calls, not only from the refs, but from the Raiders' own coaching staff, Josh McDaniels and Patrick Graham. Raiders lost this game themselves, but the refs also did them no favors. You got David Carr here showing how every freaking play, it seems like Max Crosby is being held, and so was Chandler Jones. And it was just so constant where every single play you just expected Max Crosby to be held. And he even said so himself, it's just part of the game. And I do want to focus on the refs. I do want to focus on the fact that, yes, the Raiders pretty much put this game away in the very end when they had that interception against Baker Mayfield, but it was called back on a kind of BS gray area PI call. And then also Max Crosby had that huge sack. Jerry Tillery was called for unsportsmanlike conduct because he knocked the football out of a player's hands after the sack. You see that crap happen all the time. I've even seen Crosby do that, and it never gets called for unsportsmanlike, but it wiped away that sack. And it was kind of BS. It was BS, but I will say at the beginning of the game and even in the middle of the game, the refs were fair, even favorable to the Raiders at times. And really, I felt like the Raiders themselves lost this game, and they shouldn't have even been in this situation to allow the Rams to come back so easily, scoring 2 touchdowns in just under 5 minutes after only having 3 points the entire game. Now, Josh McDaniels, he is at the center stage of this. He had some BS play calling, 3rd and 5. When the Raiders are already in field goal range, you go and you run a halfback draw to Josh Jacobs. It gets absolutely nothing. On 3rd and 5, why don't you just pass the football? Why don't you pass the football? He made weird calls like this. Another critical 3rd down when you're in scoring range in Rams territory. He does a screen pass to DJ Turner, this guy who rarely plays. I just don't understand some of the decision making that Josh McDaniels did. Felt like it put us in a worse position. And this is the most important thing that needs to be brought up, which is the fact that prior to this season with genius Josh McDaniels, when the Raiders are winning by double digits, they've been 20-2. And by the way, these have not been great Raiders teams over the past 10 years. Let's just keep it real. Not the best teams over these past 10 years. Still 20-2 when we are freaking leading by double digits, but with genius Josh, 0-4. So somehow we get these big leads and just freaking blow it. So I do not understand what exactly is happening with Mr. Genius Josh. But Josh McDaniels does try to make it look like he's upset with the refs, and he got a little heated today, and I thought it was sincere, but who knows? Maybe he's understanding the PR game and knows he's got to play it up and look a little angry, look a little Chucky mode, or else people are going to think he's doing tank season. Losing to Jeff Saturday in historical fashion. Now you're losing to Baker Mayfield in historical fashion, and I will say, it did almost feel too much like, oh, it's the Baker Mayfield hour, oh, the man of the hour, and it did feel a little planned, and I did feel like, oh man, they're really going to let this guy come back in the end. But at the same time, Raiders also let this game slip. Yes, it felt like the refs in the NFL hyped up Baker Mayfield, let him come back in this game very easily with some BS calls and also the non-calls, the non-holding calls, but Raiders had a shot. And part of this is Baker Mayfield himself. And this goes to Patrick Graham. We talked about Josh McDaniels, some of his BS calls on 3rd down. And also, you're running the ball so much with Josh Jacobs. Even though the guy's banged up, throw the football. Derek Carr only had like 20 passing attempts. It was absolutely ridiculous. David Carr, I was completely shocked. They lined up in press man coverage with 15 seconds left. This is him quoting Baker Mayfield. And yeah, you saw no safety help for Sam Webb lined up over Van Jefferson, and that was the game-winning touchdown. And when I saw Sam Webb one-on-one with Van Jefferson, I knew it was going to be a touchdown as soon as Baker Mayfield released the football. And it made me think like, bro, why are you doing this? Why are you calling this kind of defensive play? There's 15 seconds left. Give him some safety help. You know they're going to have to go deep. They literally cannot let the ball, land in bounds. They can't be tackled in bounds or else the clock will run. They had no timeout. So really sus as hell play calling by Patrick Graham as well as Josh McDaniels. It makes people have the tinfoil hat back on and say, hey, what are these guys trying to do? Are these guys trying to lose out now? Did they just win some games in a row to get us happy and get us excited? And now they're making these same calls that we saw happen against Jeff Saturday and the Colts. But even Wade Phillips, former Rams defensive coordinator in recent time, really unbelievable that the Raiders would be impressed, man, with no deep help and with a 6-point lead. So objectively, we know Patrick Graham called ridiculous plays in the end to allow the Rams to easily score. But at the same time, the refs did help the Rams get in scoring range. But I will say, it did almost feel like Jets versus Raiders in 2020 when the Jets did like an all-out blitz cover 0 on the last play to let Derek Carr easily score the game-winning touchdown to Ruggs because the Jets were tanking at that time. It did feel like that to me. Now, I'm not saying Josh McDaniels is tanking, but I'm saying we were calling play calls that almost look like we are tanking. I mean, straight up, everybody's commenting on this right now. Max Crosby saying we just kept giving them chances. He was very disappointed throughout this game. And Davante Adams, yes, he had over 70 yards in the first half of the game, but in the second half of the game, you would not even know that Davante Adams even existed. You would not even think he's a player on the Raiders team because he was not utilized and he was not even targeted. And don't try to tell me that Jalen Ramsey was locking him down. No, in the first half of the game, Davante Adams had absolutely no problem against Jalen Ramsey. And we also have Matt Schneiderman also commenting on Davante Adams, his lack of production, 2 targets in the second half, practically no yards. He caught less than 4 passes only once in the 62 games that he was with the Packers. But in this game, he has less than 4 passes. He already has 4 games with fewer than 4 catches with the Raiders. And all 4 of those times, it was L. So what is Josh McDaniels doing? What did he do with his offensive play calling in the second half? He ran Jacobs into the ground. Even though Jacobs was hurt, he kept running the football. Josh Jacobs had, I believe, 27 carries in this game. The Raiders scored on their first 3 possessions. After that, red zone interception by Carr. That was Carr's big mistake today. Red zone interception. That end of the game interception, I don't put that on Derek Carr because in my opinion, game was already over. He had like 5 seconds. It was a Hail Mary. That was a garbage time interception at the end of the game for Derek Carr. But 3 and out. Oh, we get a field goal. We had 3 field goals. Our scores were only 3 field goals, 1 touchdown. Then we had a bunch of field goals, right? And then another 3 and out. So lack of production for Derek Carr, for Josh McDaniels, and for this offense. And Derek Carr had 137 passing yards. Yes, it looked bad, but at the same time, he didn't have many attempts. Only 20 attempts, and compare that to Baker Mayfield, who had 35 attempts here. And it just seemed like Josh McDaniels would not put the game in Carr's hands. And by the way, Carr was doing really well in the first half of the game. He was connecting to Davante Adams. They had 71 yards, 3 receptions, 7 targets, only had 2 targets in the second half of the game. Matt Collins on the reverse. That was working out in the beginning of the game. You had Matt Collins actually get 40 rushing yards because Matt Collins on the reverse was working out. And then the Raiders just went away from that. They just decided to go away from that. And this is what really kills me. Jacobs had his pinky hurt, a hand injury, was questionable for a while. And you just keep running the football with him and you don't try to do anything else. And this is a Rams defense that did not have Aaron Donald. This is a Rams defense that is banged up, to say the least. And you keep just running it with Josh. It doesn't work out. To me, it was just a little ridiculous. It was just playing losing football, going away from what's working. But really, I think all eyes are on Josh McDaniels and Patrick Graham for this game, and also this secondary. Nate Hobbs, he did not do himself any favors in this game, and he gave up some really big plays, whether it be an out route or a deep passing play at the end of the game to like a 4th string receiver too. Nate Hobbs had tons of trouble, but he's still recovering from some injuries. But really, I think Patrick Graham called some suspect plays in the end to help the Rams win the game. I think Josh McDaniels, like I said earlier, 3rd down, 3rd and 5, you do a halfback draw. 3rd down, you do a screen play to DJ Turner, some guy who rarely ever plays. It just felt like you were making decisions to not put your players in the best position. And Davante Adams, whenever he doesn't get targets in the second half, yeah, we blow 13-point leads. And that's what happened again. The Raiders blew a 13-point lead. And I will say, the refs were shady as hell. Never cold holding on Max Crosby. The Raiders put this game away in the last drive. I mean, they did. They had the sack. They called it back with the unsportsmanlike penalty, had the pick, and they called it back with the PI. But I will say, at the same time, Raiders did themselves no favors. They should not have been in this position to allow the refs to easily rig it against them like this. And the playoffs look very distant. I mean, the only way they make the playoffs now is if they certainly win out. The only silver lining is the fact that they lost to an NFC team. Because the Raiders lost to an NFC team, still, if you win out, you have a 40% chance to make the playoffs, and it is still possible. If you would have lost to an AFC team, I would say the season's over. But because we lost to an NFC team, we still could win out and make it to the playoffs. And who knows? All eyes need to be on Josh McDaniels and Patrick Graham. Yes, it looked like they were tanking in the beginning of the season. Then it kind of went away from that, and it seemed like, oh, they're trying to win. They beat the Chargers. They beat the Broncos. They beat the Seahawks. Oh, they're actually trying to win it. But hey, you can still have a top 5 draft pick if you only win 5 games this season. The Raiders currently have a 5-8 record. So if the Raiders end up with a 5-12 record, you can still have a top 5 draft pick. And then, hey, we're going to be looking at this coaching staff and thinking, hey, was this tank season? So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Who do you put this loss on? Who are you concerned about in the future? We are still going to be live every single game, dropping Raiders content all the time, win or lose, Raiders till I die. Like this video if you haven't already, and subscribe to this channel for more Raiders content. My name is WiFiWillie. Peace out, and I hope you have a good one.